Hello, and welcome to a live episode of That Christian Panel on Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I'm one of your panelists, Keri. Thank you guys for waiting. Thanks for your patience tonight. We're also simulcasting on Rumble, and I appreciate your patience. I had camera and microphone problems that are all sorted out now. And I'm here tonight with Brahma Bull. Hello,
Yep.
Brahma.
Hi. No jacket tonight. It's too hot. Probably no jacket for the next 2 months. I'm burning up in here.
You
But good to see
also,
everybody.
good to see you. You look hot. It looks hot there.
Yeah, it's warm. We're approaching 90, which Colorado is we're just not used to it. And being in the garage is even worse. So it's warm.
You need to get Greta Thunberg in there to help you
Yeah.
guys.
Well, she just blows a whole lot more hot air.
How dare you?
How dare you?
We're also joined by the lovely Michelle from Force of Light Entertainment. Hello, Michelle. How are you doing?
Good. I'm hot too. I don't have my upstairs isn't insulated well enough, so it's hot here in Tennessee. So I might need to get a church fan for this eventually.
Yeah.
And then we also have a special guest tonight. Please welcome for the first time on That Christian Panel, Little Chad.
Oh, well, I've been in the chat before, but yeah, this is my first time on the show. Thank you for letting me join. I appreciate it. And I see how Brahma would wear the jacket in Texas in 100-degree heat, but not for your show, Keri. So
That was
That's
a
not very
one-time
nice.
event at a special meetup. I could handle it for that 3 or 4 hours.
I'm just going to echo that it's very hot here, and my AC went out yesterday. And with all the other contractors and everything going on, today was a crazy day trying to get that back. So, where are you, Chad? Are you in a hot place? You don't have to tell us where, but is it hot?
Virginia. So it's definitely warm. The entire state is under drought advisory because we've been having 95 to 100-degree days and no rain for a few weeks. So it's doing some damage to the lawns, that's for sure. So, but yeah.
Yeah, here as well. Well, thank you guys. And like I said, thank you for your patience in getting started. We have a topic tonight that we've kind of touched on in a few different episodes, but we haven't directly focused on this specifically. We've talked about marriage, we've talked about masculinity and femininity, but tonight we're going to be talking about the destruction of the family and a Christian perspective on how this is happening, why this is happening. And as always, I'll tell you, everyone's welcome in the chat. We are a panel of believers, but we welcome everyone. And you can ask questions, you can disagree, just try and be civil while you're doing it. That's all. Why don't we start with, can we start with this clip that you sent me, Michelle?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see. This is a clip. James Lindsay shared it also. He said, communists always try to destroy faith, family, and property.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see below, he was quote tweeting the clip that you sent me that Melanie Bennett shared. She says, abolish the family advocate Dr. Sophie Lewis explains that the desire to protect children's sexual innocence is a moral panic derived from Anita Bryant, and that the true threat to children is the nuclear family. I'm very excited to see what you guys think about this. I know what I thought immediately, but let's go. If you guys haven't seen this, let's play this.
The fear that comes with the suggestion of sort of sexual threat to children, the weaponization of the sexual innocence of the child, is something that back then in the early 80s and still today, we do not have a brave, united kind of left response to, right? So when someone gets called a groomer in this weaponized, organized way, the template for which was laid by Anita Bryant in the 80s and the sort of Reaganite campaign of organized homophobia and sort of, Christian evangelical capitalism on steroids, well, we lose an enormous amount of movement memory about where the location of sexual violence actually is in the world, right? And in the fabric of capitalist social reproduction. where the threat to children actually is the private patriarchal nuclear household, right? And when we sort of capitulate to the sorts of moves that make a kind of threat and a social terror out of the figure of the queer person, we throw out this enormous and indispensable component of utopian wisdom.
Okay. So it's not just that the family needs to be destroyed, and that any desire to protect the sexual innocence of children is just a moral panic, and it doesn't need to be protected. It's that the family itself, the nuclear family itself, is the actual threat to children. Like, that's why it must be destroyed.
And the patriarchy,
And
because
the
you got to have your
patriarchy.
feminism.
Right.
Well, it's just like, my mind was in there. One, like, what is she actually advocating for? Like, do we know?
So I pulled up a lot of quotes we can look at from feminist theory and queer theory, but they believe, in a nutshell, before I explain this, let me just recommend these two books. I've talked about these on Deprogrammed before. These are two of the recent books we read for book club. Critical Dilemma, in particular, this is by Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. This is a great book. It's written from a Christian perspective, and it's like an encyclopedia explaining all of social justice ideology. And it has an entire chapter on queer theory. It's all about, basically, I would say in layman's terms, like, what is woke from a Christian perspective? And then it includes why Christianity is a better belief system. And this book is invaluable. The other one that we just finished for book club is The Queering of the American Child, which is by Logan Lansing and James Lindsay. And this one's excellent as well. It's just a shorter book. This one's just about the queer theory part of woke, of social justice, and about what's happening in the schools. All that being said, they have a lot of source material in these books. They directly pull out the quotes that show that the architects of this ideology, the architects of social justice, of woke, of this new belief system that's taking over our culture, politics, in some churches, that the architects of it, in the theory itself, talk about how all norms have to be destroyed, all norms and all traditions, because they view norms as inherently oppressive. Any societal norm is only a norm, they say, because of an oppressor group, like white people or men, like the patriarchy, imposing that as a norm. So they view marriage as inherently oppressive, that it's something that must be conquered. The family structure as inherently oppressive and something that must be conquered. And we can look at some of those direct quotes in a second, but they even believe, Michelle, they believe and say it outright in queer theory, that age is another one of these identity categories where there is an oppressor group and an oppressed group. They say that children are the oppressed group and that we need to liberate them by basically getting rid of age of consent laws, basically treating them as adults.
Just throw them into the sexual deep end.
Yeah.
I know that was
See if they
kind of
make
long,
it out.
but in terms of like what she's advocating for, total upside down world, destroy anything that's considered normal or traditional, destroy the family, destroy marriage, and then we're going to have this utopia. I mean, ultimately that also includes destroying capitalism.
Well, it's Marxist theory.
Yeah,
Marxist
it's not
theory.
really new ideas. It's just the new veneer on top of it. I mean, if you want to look at it, this is the playbook out of the Maoist Cultural Revolution.
Yes.
Separate the children from their families, make them ideologically dependent on the state and what they're telling you. And the next thing you know, you've got 15-year-olds taking their parents out on stage to make them do a struggle session, in front of everyone and accept the truth as they know it. We've seen this happen not even 60 years ago in China. Before that, it's not that dissimilar from that certain Austrian dictator youth that they were running in Germany to make sure their children were being raised to not think too many different thoughts. It's terrible. And now the new layer, though, the interesting layer is the sexuality issue. Like that is the weird thing that's new. Because if you study history, that is a new element compared to what they did in the past, or at least was overtly done in the past. And that's actually more disturbing, that they're so focused in this generation on getting kids able to consent or make those choices at ages of like 9, 10, whatever, sometimes even earlier, so that they can, I mean, I have my thoughts on what they're doing it for, but that's the disturbing part to me.
Well, here's my thing and what Keri just said. So you talk about a utopia, but if you follow everything that you just said about it, that would end in the population dying out. Because, I mean, unless I missed something there, it doesn't sound like they want marriage. And I'm assuming beyond that, they don't really want heterosexual relationships at all. Because I feel like if marriage is oppressive, heterosexual relationships have to be oppressive in their own right. At which point, unless we figure out how to artificially create life, the world ends.
Yes, I think this is why when I hear some people online call it a death cult,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
really resonates.
Well,
As
this panel isn't supposed to be inherently political, but I mean that is the globalist agenda. I mean,
Yeah.
we want the
is,
population
yeah.
reduced. If you
Yes.
can do that two ways, you can either get rid of the birth rate, or you can kill people off. Either way works for them.
Or you can
And
do
if you're
C,
going to
all
get
of the
everybody into
above.
queer theory, then yeah, exactly what Michelle was saying. The birth rate goes down.
It is a little off topic, but if you look at all the advanced Western nations for the last 30 years, everyone talks about the population of the planet. If you're on like the climate agenda, you'll talk about how the population is unsustainable. It's like, what's unsustainable is the population decline that is about to hit every advanced Western nation in the next 40 years. Like, I mean, you can see it in China right now. They had the forced one child policy, and it is going to destroy their country in the next 30 years because they built their entire economic structure on labor, cheap, large labor pools. And thanks to their one child policy, they don't have enough people to replace
They're aging out.
their aging population. Japan is the tip of the spear. They were the first advanced nation to go into population decline in the 90s. And their economy, if you look at it, has been in effective recession since the mid 90s. There's been government stimulus to try to get things going, but it is a terrible problem, and it starts, and you can just set a clock to it. It starts with destroying the traditional value structure of your country, and then immediately the population rates decline, and you start having birth rate replacement not happening. You got to have 2.5 births per person, per couple, to actually have population growth to offset, like what you're going to be losing. And we're not, I mean, I think if you look at native born Americans, we're actually not at 2.5 births anymore. I think we're at like 1.7 statistically.
I'd be interested to see if that's gone up any, because I know, like, all of a sudden, like, I'm kind of right in the middle of millennials, and it felt like, or it definitely happened. Millennials definitely start having more children than Gen X. Like,
Just a
it
lot
kind
later.
of, what'd you say?
Just a lot later.
Yes, but we're still having, you're seeing a lot more millennials with 3 to 4 kids.
Now, I might say, I'm just going to throw this out there, that might be a personal observation more than a population-wide observation. I think statistically, millennials are actually deferring childbirth and having less kids as a group than previous generations, even Gen X. A lot of that is because of the economics, that the people who might otherwise be inclined don't feel economically self-sufficient enough to have children, and also the crazy. there's the infectious crazy level is gone went way up into the millennial groups compared to the other generations, where you have a whole segment that is, as you guys mentioned, worshiping a death cult, and out celebrating their abortions or doing whatever they want, on social media.
Or
And
or
so,
just outright selfish, like the
yeah,
dinks. The people who
dual
celebrate
income,
being
no
dinks.
kids.
Yeah.
Wait, what
I
is
have
dink? Dual
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 income,
income
no
with no
kids.
kids. They don't plan on having kids. They plan on just using both of their incomes to just be as selfish as they possibly can and just do whatever they want. They have no interest in actually having a family.
So I live in Virginia, in the zone where government employees are the number one. You either work for the government, you work for somebody, a business that does business with the government, and the dual income, no kids is the majority of people in that millennial age range. They are just out having a good time. They're buying lots of wine. They're doing whatever they want to do, and they don't understand that they're gonna run into a lot of issues around year 60, where they have no family, nobody's there to care about them anymore. I mean, that's coming down the line, but I can, like, to offset what Michelle was saying, my observation is that there's a lot of people not having kids at all and just choosing to have these dual government incomes, and which is on our dime effectively, and going out and having a good time.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me.
I'm trying to
But
find some of those.
well, my pastor showed a slide recently during a sermon about declining birth rates. So he was talking about what you were talking about, little Chad, how we've just been declining every year. Our birth rates dropping more and more in a lot of industrialized countries. But he also pulled up the family size, which is what you're talking about, Michelle. And he was showing how it's dropped, how it used to be that on average, I wish I had it in front of me, or I wish I had queued up that sermon. On average, women were having, between 4 and 5 kids, and now it's like one, if they do have kids.
Yeah.
So even the family size itself, people don't seem to be creating, siblings. If they do choose to have a child, it's very focused on that one child, which in some people believe maybe if you only have one, and if you happen to be a millennial parent, you might be raising a little narcissist. I don't know.
Well, and there's something to say with the economy and just how things are now, that we can't. It's very hard to do the traditional thing at this point, having the mother stay home and take care of the family on a single income at this point. And kids do cost a lot. So those who want a kid, I mean, they may have the one kid and they may not decide to have any more because the income can't support multiple children if they're trying to do it the traditional way. I don't know if that's a fact. It just seems like an observation that would be pretty common sense based on how our economy works compared to, say, when it was our grandparents. Our grandparents could live off of the one income,
Yeah.
and they did. The mothers stayed home for the most part and took care of the family stuff.
If
So-
you got started early, like I'm in a household with the one income. My wife stays home. We homeschool my son, and it was only because I worked the entire way through college. I went right out of college into working. I got a political science degree, and I could have spent 10 years not getting paid to move up that chain, but I was like, no, I can't do it. So I went into business, got experience, income, and so I was always able to support my wife without her having to work, even though she's got a degree and can go do things, which is important because in Virginia, if you have a degree, you can homeschool without having to submit the paperwork and do things. So that was important. That actually worked out important for us. But if I was like 3 years behind where I was when I started, I would have hit right into the downturn in 2008 and 9. I would have got crushed. Definitely wouldn't have been able to afford the house that I had, my starter home, which I then was able to move in from that to the slightly bigger home. And I got, it was through my own choices, but I also got very lucky. There's a lot of my friends who were still living with their parents because even after graduating college, the home prices were so high before the crash in 2008 that they couldn't afford it. Then after everything crashed, they couldn't get jobs. I mean, they deferred a lot of things. So they're talking like by the time they're in their mid 30s, I'm already married and have a child. They're just now thinking, okay, maybe I can start looking at doing those steps. And that it also coincided with hookup apps. Like, I got married, I found my wife and we were good. And I was out of the system when all of that stuff hit. And I started hearing stories from some of my friends about basically how technology was almost pushing them to make choices that would avoid a traditional life. I mean, there's something I think in that element too, where the entire culture shifted to try to push men
Hookup culture instead
and
of
women
marriage.
into a hookup culture instead of a marriage culture. I mean, there's whole other shows and podcasts about that too, but it's almost like a flux of events. But you look back historically and it makes sense though, because the personal computer and the internet was such a game changer technology wise. You always have massive upheaval around super shifts in technology. Historically, printing press comes around, you get hundreds of years of war right after that, because you start getting such
Yeah.
massive dissemination of ideas without any kind of checks or balance. People that haven't adjusted to what that's like, being able to read the Bible on your own and not just have it told to you was a real, I mean, that's how we got the entire Reformation, right? Then you have the Industrial Revolution, and that caused, again, a whole bunch of 50, 60, 70 years of wars and other upheaval. And we had just sort of processed that by the end of World War One and World War Two. And that peace zone after that was basically because we had finally gotten through processing the Industrial Revolution and people working in mechanical jobs. And then boom, the 1990s, we get the internet, and it just, I think we're still in the phase where we're working through as a population how to process that kind of information. I mean, it's more information than any person's ever had available as soon as you want to search for it.
Well, and I think Randy Wallen's super chat slots right into that whole conversation too. The pill was a big change, a huge change.
Not to mention the biochemical issues that it causes. I mean, I think that's an issue that gets hushed up a lot.
I've only recently started seeing people talking about that.
Yeah, I hadn't heard about it until about 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to talk about the prototype for what hormone blockers will be doing to this generation of kids that are getting on it, the pill is effectively the first massive hormone blocker given. And there's all sorts of issues that have come out of it. Cancer rates going up, a lot of issues with fertility as a result of it.
Yes.
I mean, it's just common sense. You can't stop a hardwired biological system in your body for large periods of time without screwing something up and causing problems and repercussions you don't want to think about. But
yeah, we should probably actually read the super chat too.
Yeah.
Do you want to read that? Do you want to read that one, Brahma?
Sure. The pill gave women an option to delay marriage or kids. Now many have a tough time getting pregnant and also find it hard to find a hubby who can look past the dozens of men who've been in her bed before.
Yep.
And that dozens number seems to be climbing in today's
what is the parlance
society.
of the youth now? The body count.
The body count.
The body count. Thank you for that super chat, by the way, Randy. Also, let's knock a few of these out while we're doing them. Super Base gifted 5 memberships. Thank you, Membership Fairy, for being here. Somebody asked, how did I get a membership? It's probably because of Super Based. So thank you, Super Based. Randy Wallen also for $5. Thanks, Randy. Says, what more evidence do you need? They want to have sex with your children. Certainly seems to be the case. Brett Cohen, thank you for the $2 super chat. Says, don't forget the Danks, Disney adults, no kids. That's the thing too, I'm sure.
That's a real thing.
That is the thing.
Did people say that, or did he coin that?
I think I've seen that around.
It's an alternate version of the Dinks. It's the ones that are obsessed with all things Disney. And they're fully grown adults and married.
Now,
Or
Michelle
a
and
couple. They don't have to be married to be dinks or danks, I guess.
Michelle and Carrie, I know from talking with my wife about it that from when she was an early teen, the doctors were like full court pressing her to get on like the birth control medications with the like, oh, it'll control your acne. Do it for your acne. She's because she was like,
Regulate your
yeah,
period.
she was like a young and they told her like, oh, it'll help with your cramps. It'll do all this stuff. Did you guys have a similar like was the because I as a male I didn't have to have that experience. Were you getting like from medical establishment like that much pressure to get on that kind of medication?
Not pressure. It did get brought up once to me.
Yes, in my case, it was, I don't know if I would call it pressure either, but it was treated as the norm,
Mm-hmm.
as what you
Yeah.
do. You go on the pill, uh, not just to prevent unwanted pregnancy, but you go on the pill to, like you said, deal with acne and to regulate your period and to, whip it into shape, like, so you can be in control kind of thing. And it was pushed as I never, like I said, until recently started hearing about all of the mountains of evidence about the things that it's doing to your body that may not be great for you.
I mean,
Well,
maybe it's because I'm a chiropractor's daughter who's a little iffy on certain, chemicals and stuff anyways. My logical, rational brain just always said to myself, if something is telling your body 24/7 that it's pregnant, that can't be good for it.
Well, and
Right?
the studies that are coming out now, basically that women who are coming off of the pill trying to have a child now don't find their spouse attractive or their partner attractive once they're off the pill. It's altering their hormones so much that while their body is tricked into thinking it's pregnant while on the pill, they are
Wow.
attracted to their husband. The second they come off the pill, they're not attracted in any way sexually to their husbands.
Wow. This probably and that makes sense from a biological perspective, because if you're getting hormones that are telling your body that you're pregnant,
Mhm.
when you're pregnant, your body is all about nourishing and supporting and growing this child, and you're about nesting, and you're more about providing a safe, comfortable nest. It's not about making sure you're picking the fittest mate. If you're just looking at this through a evolutionary, biology perspective, that makes so much sense. So this is probably why a lot of my old feminist friends, when I was in the woke cult, were dating these very, what would you, effeminate male
Mhm.
feminists?
Yeah.
Where it's sort of like, that makes,
The
this is me. This is
emasculated
just,
ones.
yes, the emasculated ones.
So yeah, when getting to circling back to our the topic about the traditional family,
Yeah.
there's so many pressures from you've got pharmaceutical pressure in this case, you've got technological pressure, you've got just all this inundation of different things coming at you that are just pushing men and women away from their traditional roles. There's attacks on churches. It's not even coming from outside of the churches. Now, I shared a video and I think I linked it to you, Keri, and Brahma about, I couldn't believe there was a clip of a female preacher talking about if Jesus were around today, he'd be talking about how amazing women
Yeah.
who got their abortions were.
It's a
Oh, I
mercy.
saw that.
Yeah, and I was like, this is no. Do you forget that he went into the temple? And I mean, it's ridiculous. Even churches are excommunicating people trying to stay traditional. This is, and when I say traditional, I mean just things that were just common sense 15 years ago, not even controversial within the church, like they were some, cult, in Arizona making women dress in these terrible dresses and do the hairdos like some of those fundamentalist groups were doing. Just standard Christian values are becoming under attack within churches, and it's disturbing because
Yeah.
you used to be you were prepared to have it come at you from outside. Like, I knew that being Christian wasn't always going to be the cool thing, right? You're not going to You're not going to go out there and be a rock star and be that kind of thing. But you're not, but you're prepared for it, right? You're prepared, your family, if you've got a good support system within the church, they'll talk, you'll have a way to be prepared for when people come at your values from the outside. You don't expect it from coming from the inside, from the pulpit. And that's what's bothering me. That's scary. It's
Can we just watch this clip so the audience knows this is what you're talking about? If you're at a church, and this is what you tweeted, a little chat. You said, if you're at a church and you hear this coming from the pulpit, immediately get up and leave that church. Don't sit in silence. Be an example to others that this is not right and should not be respected. Here, let's play this one.
Jesus were giving his sermon today, he might also have said, "Blessed are those who end pregnancies, for they will be known for their loving kindness."
Like, make it make sense.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, exactly. That I can't even tell you how just full of rage I was seeing that clip. I mean, I don't know the context. This could have been someone playing dress up, doing some crazy little group, non-denominational, not official, not doing anything real. But I haven't attended a seminary, right? I don't have a doctorate in theology. Michelle, can you tell me, am I wrong that is not in any way something Jesus would have said? Am I crazy?
He definitely would not have said that. There's zero chance. Hell would freeze over before he said something that obscene. I mean, it's crazy. Well, I mean, it's not crazy. A better word for it, it is crazy, but it's evil.
Oh, it's progressive Christianity again. I mean, we already did a show on it. We didn't hit that part of it. We had, a lot of the progressive Christian ideals, but they're basically there to subvert every major Christian value.
Yeah.
And it's to destroy the church. It's to usher in my opinion, communism, Marxism. I mean, they want society raising your kids.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I was thinking. If you go back to the original video Keri started with attacking faith, family, and all the traditionals, what they're basically attacking is the pillars that held up our civilization.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Faith, family, all those, capitalism, all these things are the pillars holding up our civilization as it was built. And the idea obviously is you knock out enough pillars, it collapses, and then you get to rebuild from there, because if you look at it, they're specifically attacking the defenses, the children's natural defenses before they move out into the adult world, right? First line of defense on everything for children is the family, your parents. Your mom and dad are line one, protecting you from all the basic stuff. As you get a little older, your parents hopefully are bringing you to church, and you're getting your next line of defense, which is your faith, which can help give you strength when you face questions or difficult choices. And if you take those two pillars out and children are just left wandering the wilderness, I mean, I think of Pinocchio, right? When Pinocchio ends up at Pleasure Island and starts making all the bad choices because he's just a kid on his own without any good influence, and you just got poor Jiminy Cricket trying to convince him don't do these things, don't do, they're bad. They want that conscience gone. They want them to, they want to be the wolves to be able to lead these kids into whatever behaviors they want them to do, and then they can shape them to the next level. And that's why it's also important, if it is feasible. I am one of the strongest advocates you'll ever meet for homeschooling. Do not let your kids into an institution designed to program them to be institutionalists, which is what public schools are. Even good public schools, even the best public schools, are teaching your children to be non-critical thinkers that listen to the system as it's telling them what to do. And it's not because they're getting faith. I mean, at all the best churches I've been to and people, they don't run away from questions or challenges to their faith. They invite it, explain it, confront it, overcome it. if you try to challenge the system in a public school, what do you get? You've seen it in Virginia where I
Ground
live,
to
like
dust.
Loudoun County, where a trans person did bad things in a bathroom and they didn't want to have to report on it. They arrested the dad for going to a school board meeting and bringing it up when the school board lied to everyone and said nothing had ever happened. And he's like, "BS, my daughter had that happen. I've got police reports and you're lying." So what did they do? They called the sheriffs over and had him arrested for
Meanwhile,
saying
they
it
moved the kid to another school where he did
and
it
did
again.
it again. Yeah, so you're in even, and these were in Loudoun County schools, by the way, are some of the most highly rated public schools in the entire United States, because Loudoun County usually comes in within the top 3 to 5 counties for wealth in the country. So these schools are well funded. They've got all the best teachers. They've got all the best equipment, and they've got all the normal problems everywhere else is having. And so if you're dealing with that in what is in quote unquote the best public schools, you're having, from day one, if you send your kids there, you're behind the eight ball. Your kids are there 8 hours a day, roughly.
Mm-hmm.
That, and they're sleeping hopefully 8 hours a day. So you've basically got a third, a third, and a third. Third they're sleeping, a third they're at the school with doing that, and a third they're with you. But are they really with you in that third if they're at school? Because you come home, they're probably doing homework, they're doing other things, they want to go play with their friends. So your window as a parent starts shrinking, and it's great to say quality time, but you're not going to counteract that influence that's there day in and day out.
You have to spend all of your time deprogramming what they are programmed with at school.
Yep.
So that book I recommended, The Queering of the American Child, absolutely necessary. I think if you're a parent and you still have kids in public schools, just so you can know the extent of it. There, I want to put this one quote up. I mean, this is just one. Logan Lansing, the author of this book, shared this. And he says, queering the classroom means brainwashing kids into queer Marxism. Yes. Or AKA identity Marxism, AKA woke social justice. He says, that's exactly what this teacher says, but they're less clear and concise. And this is from a teacher's action. And quote, the teacher says, despite my commitment to LGBTQ plus issues in teaching, I had not made an extensive effort to queer my own practices. Queering teaching is the act of designing a course so that students engage with and interrogate identities, not just sexual ones, in a critical manner and come to understand how social discourses structure and police those identity opinions. I mean, this is just
desensitization. I hate that word. And, just normalizing everything.
Yeah.
They spend all day doing it. Then half the TV shows spend all their time doing it. And like Chad was saying, there's not many hours of the day that you have your kids' undivided attention.
Well, and then, something you have to do. I'm not a parent, but I'm a very involved aunt. And it's like, I sit down, we have dinner multiple times a week together, and we talk. She tells me what she learned in school, whether it's history class or things like that. Sometimes I debate what she's been told in school. You have to, as a parent, and again, I'm speaking to someone who's just a very involved aunt, but you have to be invested enough in your kids to want to sit down and talk with them. Like whether that's at the dinner table, you've got to be able to spend time and build enough relationship with your children that they feel comfortable enough to tell you what they're hearing, because you do need to know what they're hearing in school.
Can I show you guys some of the feminist and queer theory quotes about the family? Let's see. Let me share this. Let me share this one instead. Okay. I don't know, Michelle, have you seen me go over some of these before?
I don't think so. No, I think I listened to one of your last ones that you did.
I mean, the thing is, it's right out there in the open. And for anyone who's watching, who's maybe, I don't know, maybe you stumbled on this video or you're not sure what we're talking about. Maybe you consider yourself to be woke or, hip and a tolerant person, or you're in social justice because you think it's about ending racism and sexism. You may not know about these quotes, and makes a lot of sense, because the people who are writing the theory, the architects of this belief system, those guys are kind of at the top. They're the ones who are deciding, where this belief system's going, what are the new tenets of this belief system. Below the queer theorists, the feminist theorists, the critical race theorists, you have the activist class. And those people are the ones who, that's kind of what I was. They take it, they learn it in college, they take it into their careers, they take it into entertainment, politics, journalism, social media companies, and they implement it. They basically spread the belief system. And then below that, I would say you have like street level or TikTok level woke. And those are people who have no connection to the theory at all. So they don't even know where their belief system comes from or why they believe a lot of what they believe. But this is where it comes from. If you read critical race theory, feminist theory, queer theory, these are some quotes about the family. I'll just read a few. The nuclear family must be destroyed. Whatever its ultimate meaning, the breakup of families now is an objectively revolutionary process. That's feminist Linda Gordon, esteemed feminist. Robin Morgan from Ms. Magazine. I feel that man-hating is an honorable and viable political act, that the oppressed have a right to class hatred against the class that is oppressing them. You can see the roots in Marxism here as well, because she's still using the phrase, well, she's using oppressors and oppressed, and she's using a class. Yeah. Gosh, we cannot destroy the inequities between men and women until we destroy marriage. That's also Robin Morgan. I claim that rape exists anytime sexual intercourse occurs when it has not been initiated by the woman out of her own genuine affection and desire. There's another one that's even more to the point. I think it's Andrea Dworkin, who says marriage as an institution developed from rape as a practice. Heterosexual intercourse is the pure formalized expression of contempt for women's bodies.
I'm going to guess these women are lesbians.
Andrea Dworkin is.
They're also clearly not students of history, right? So the Western Christian civilization is the first civilization in human history to put an emphasis on rape against women as a crime. Other cultures, other religions did not give a toss about it. It was the Christian Western values that made that a criminal act, and over time evolved to the point where it is not just it's morally reprehensible criminal act prosecuted on the regular. These are, it really bothers me especially when the people attacking it attack, Christian values as are rooted in rape of women and things. I was like, do you not understand? If you go live in any other culture that is not based on Christian value sets, women do not have a good time. Like, go to India, go to China, go to Africa, like non-Christian nations tend to, and these are stories that come out usually every few weeks right now, where there's gangs of men that do bad behavior and they generally don't get punishment. Like in Germany, which was a Christian nation but is now being shifted by migrants to a different tradition. We just had that new story about a woman who was assaulted by a group, and a person who spoke out against it online got more jail time for speaking words online than the perpetrators of the physical act against the woman.
Yeah. Well, Soviet Russia.
Yeah, and that is not a Christian value bringing that about. It is
Soviet Russia, they basically made women communal property. You could sign up for whatever woman you wanted to sleep with, because that's fair and equal.
How long did that go on, Brahma?
That was under
time?
Lenin. I don't know. I don't know by the time Stalin took over. I mean, Stalin was worse, so I imagine it got worse before it got any better. But it was definitely when Lenin was first instituting it.
I think part of the shift was actually World War II, when Stalin had to use so many women in combat. Like in Stalingrad and other countries, once you've trained an entire half your military of women, it's a little harder to subjugate to that degree. They were still not, obviously, there was never a premier of Russia that was female in the entire Soviet system. So it didn't go all the way up there. They put things out there for the sake of trying to embarrass the US, like we put the first woman in space, we did this or that, but it wasn't necessarily because they were committed to those values. It was they were trying to use it as public relations to basically attack the United States from within. And to a certain degree, over time, it worked. There's a lot of evidence that it's one of the lessons that they was learned after the Soviet collapse was, and this is specifically with how China's approaching things, rather than getting into a military buildup race, it's a lot more efficient to just spend money on American internal politics to shift how things happen, than rather than being an external threat that the United States tends to rally around against it. So
A great book on stuff like that, The Naked Communist by Skousen. If you're interested in what was going on at the beginning of basically communism under Lenin, under Stalin, that one will give you all of the ideals. It's basically the book that Saul Alinsky based his stuff off of.
Can I just say that Sheila really's got a real zinger there.
Sheila's Jeffries. When a woman reaches, oh yeah. Well, the thing I was going to say is you're pointing out, well, Chad, that they don't have a understanding of, how Christian values help to make rape illegal. Like they don't have an understanding of history and about culture, but these are people who want to define all heterosexual sex as rape. So when they talk about rape, they're talking about sex. They're talking about all sex between a man and a woman. And that quote you're pointing at, Michelle, when a woman reaches orgasm with a man, she is only collaborating with the patriarchal system, eroticizing her own oppression. Sheila Jeffries.
The one two down from that, the Catherine McKinnon one. I know when you watched or when you did that one on your stream, that one set you off pretty good.
All sex, even consensual sex between a married couple, is an act of violence perpetrated against a woman. Catherine McKinnon is not it's not like she was on the fringes of the feminist movement. I mean, this is one of the most prominent figures of the feminist movement, and these are their beliefs, that all heterosexual sex is rape, that the very institution of marriage is, that all marriage is oppression between a man and a woman.
Again, I have to ask, are any of these women straight? I mean, I just don't know how a straight woman makes those comments, is why I ask.
I don't know.
I would venture to guess that most of them aren't very good looking either.
We might be dealing with WNBA level stats on that. So it is crazy when you look at it. The most freedom and upward mobility ever achieved by women in the history of humankind has come under Christian nations. Developed Christian nations under the Christian common law are what have given, and again, the first pillar of that was when they protected women's chastity and made that something worth arresting the man who did it rather than the woman who was assaulted. It is commonplace in other cultures where the woman who was assaulted is the person who is blamed for the act rather than the man or men who commit it.
Or stoned for it.
And get stoned. I mean, this is wackadoodle. And this is because they stopped teaching history and start focusing so much on queer theory and attacking families. So they alienate you from mom and dad so you can't see mom and dad. They make no fault divorce laws so mom and dad don't have to be together anymore. And then you're developing a whole culture of single moms situations, which, has its own issues. You've got, men tend to be alienated from their children because of the way the system works. There is a predisposition to assume the mother is the primary caregiver in all circumstance. and to reduce, as you know, to weekends or every other weekends, the male influence. And when children need both, children need 50-50, right? There are things a mother gives that a father can't. There are things a father gives that a mother can't. To have a properly well developed child, you need both. Now, that's not saying that kids can't be successful and have good lives from single families or from different situations, but you're putting them behind the eight ball. God intended the man and the woman to be joined, to have children and raise their children, and
Yeah,
then
it
the
took
children
two
go out into the world.
chapters into the Bible for God to address marriage. Genesis 2:18 through 24.
Yeah,
Adam's
I mean,
basically alone. God sees it's bad. He gets an Eve.
Mhm.
Then by verse 24, it basically says man is supposed to leave his father and mother and cling to his wife. Be fruitful and multiply.
Be fruitful and multiply.
and I've had conversations with some of my friends who are living that dual income, no kid lifestyle, and I tell them, that's great. It's you can choose to do that. I can't make you go a different direction, but understand you are purposefully locking yourself off from the human condition, right? There's a time and a season, right? It is natural for you to grow up and become a parent yourself so that you can fully mature and appreciate what it is to be a parent, what the choices are once you've got kids. If you don't ever have that, you get stuck into an immature decision making level that basically taints all your other choices, right? To have a global perspective of being a human, part of it is raising a child and having a relationship that is longer than, 12 hours on Tinder, right? You've got to commit to those things because they're not easy. They're hard. Doing things that are hard is what you are meant to do. You are not meant to just have things easy and serve to you. You've got to have challenges and growth. That's why you have to have these pillars, right? Your faith and your family. Because if you never get challenged, you don't ever know. But if you have them, you get challenged and you commit to them and stay with them. There is no more rewarding experience in life than to face the challenge and overcome it.
Well, the bottom line in this discussion is the destruction of the family. What really has allowed that, and it really has been more the attack on faith. The more godless our society has gotten, the more broken we become. I mean, it goes two and two. And as far as marriage, as Christians, I know the numbers actually are a lot better as far as divorce amongst those that regularly attend church. It's not that they try to make it more dire than it actually is. Because I mean, what does God? I mean, let's just start here. What does God say or Jesus say about when they ask about divorce? The key phrase there is who God joins together. And in our society, as it's become godless, so many marriages, it's not who God joined together. The marriage wasn't even founded upon
Yes.
who God joined
Yeah.
together.
Thank you.
The marriage is founded upon, oh, she's sexy. Oh, he's hot. Oh, we had sex a few times. We really have these emotions and feelings for each other right now. And we get married. And eventually we're not really happy. And we part our ways. Where you see, like, even if you see people that are divorced from genuine Christian homes, it will, it's like a death to them because it's not what they wanted in their life. Let me kind of come against this idea that all these women just want to be divorced. At least in marriage, in Christian homes, I do not find that the case. I find women struggle at great lengths if they, I don't mean struggle like they can't ever move past it, but they didn't want it to go there. Because Christian, whether male or female, you want to stay together with that significant other. But again, back to what I was saying, it does come back to who God joins together. And people, you're not going to find who God wants you to be joined with if you're not walking in a line with God.
Yeah. Can I just take a second and answer this?
Yeah, I was just reading it too.
Yeah, I saw that as well.
And I know I have some other super chats to read. Thank you guys so much. I just want to address this one first. AD Victoria, thank you for $20. Says, question for the panel. I got caught up in the gender cult. I've detransitioned, but the damage has been done. I can no longer have children. what can I do with the rest of my life? I've returned to my faith, but feel lost. And thank you, first of all, for sharing that with us. And I'm sorry for the pain that you must feel about this and about your past and choices you've made and where you're at. And I share some of that pain because I didn't go through the gender cult, but I went through the woke cult, the feminist part of it. And I'm one of these women who delayed having kids and looked down my nose at the idea of finding meaning in family or in being a mom. And I'm struggling with that as well. And I'll just say that God has a purpose for you. Like
Yes.
God has a purpose for every person, and you are uniquely formed. And you're what I'm starting to realize is that, you know, those verses about how the church is a body and we're all different parts and we all have different talents and we all have different backgrounds that help shape us for whatever purpose it is God has molded you for, to be a witness for him to in a specific way that maybe nobody else can be. And that's great. That's a great purpose. And, you know, I like to joke that I might be a toe of the body of Christ. I don't know. Not everybody's the head. Not everybody, you know, it doesn't matter what that part is, like what your small role is to fill for the kingdom of God. Like you have a unique purpose. God has plucked you out. You were not of the world. And then beyond that, I'll just say about family, you know, I think there's sometimes we have to get out of our boxes that we've created for ourselves of like, if I'm going to have a kid, it has to be this way. A lot of the
Yes.
people I know who adopt are Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And adoption, there are lots of kids who need to be adopted.
I would say that there's nothing more Christ-like to do than adopt a child. I mean, we as Christians are, that's the literal term that's used in. We're adopted. It says Romans that we have that we've been adopted and that our heart cries out, Abba, Father. It quite literally uses that language. And I also just wanted to say about that, AD. Again, I don't know if you're male or female. But I know people, I know what a very good female minister felt called to singleness and did that. She's now 80 years old. She is not in want or need for people she considers her children. And I mean, will take care of her. It is just like she had a child. But because the Lord will give that to return back to your faith. So even though you can't have biological children, there are so many ways for God to fulfill that for you.
And
there's those people who need that father or mother in the faith in their life. You know, that need goes both ways.
And the fact that you've returned to your faith, a couple verses that might work for you. Matthew 19:12. For there are eunuchs who have been so from birth, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by man, and there are eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Let the one who is able to receive this receive it. Paul addresses it in 1 Corinthians. And Paul, as far as we know, was completely celibate. I mean, he seemed to prefer that because in this stretch, 1 Corinthians 7:32-35, I want you to be free from anxieties. The unmarried man is anxious about the things of the Lord, and how to please the Lord, but the married man is anxious about worldly things, how to please his wife, and his interests are divided. And the unmarried or betrothed woman is anxious about the things of the Lord, how to be holy in body and spirit, but the married woman is anxious about worldly things, how to please her husband. I say this for your own benefit, not to lay any restraint upon you, but to promote good order and to secure your undivided devotion to the Lord. So Paul's theory was if you are a celibate or called to be celibate, whether, you know, by choice or by something that happened to you, those that are celibate are to devote more time to the Lord because you have less divided attention there. And there's some more verses, but those are two I thought of right off the bat.
And that's such a great point, Brahma, because even if you're not necessarily celibate, maybe you're married and can have children, but you still do. I mean, children do require, it's a great gift, but they do require a lot of time. You could still take that verse and apply it of than devoting more of your time to the Lord. And like I said, there's such a need in churches, whether you're male or female, for mothers and fathers in the faith that really help out the next generation. There's a huge need for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I would also just add that, if you're, given the life experience you've had, you could be invaluable
Ministry.
as a shield to this younger generation from the pressures they're going to be facing, to have someone who can speak with authority on why these choices that they're being pushed to are bad. Because a lot of times, they're going to have peer pressure, they're going to have societal pressure, they're going to have school pressure to all move away from the Christian life and the good choices, and start making maybe very long-term and impactful choices at a young age. Having someone who can sit them down and look them in the eye and say, I'm not just telling you, I lived this, and I know that what you're going through, I know the pressures being put on you, and I can tell you it's not worth it. Your faith is, here's, and start giving insight from your faith and how you came back to it, and realize those choices were wrong. And I don't, there's a lot of things I like to, we have free will for a reason, right? But it's also on us to be able to say things are wrong, and having somebody who can say, I'm not just telling you it's wrong because I think it, I'm telling you it's wrong because I lived it.
Yes.
is very valuable. And I wouldn't undercut that might be one of the things God might be intending for you, to be able to provide that guidance to, even though if you can't have the children of your own, to how many other children are you going to spare that, and be able to create multitudes from the ones you protect.
And that's a
Yes.
ministry in and of itself.
Well, two things I want to say really quick, piggybacking off what Lil Chad just said. First, a great scripture, I would say, again, piggybacking off what he was saying about his testimony. Something that a scripture I don't think I fully understood until I studied church history in working on my PhD. But out of Revelation, they overcame by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. And the word of Christians' testimony is so powerful. And that goes back to what Lil Chad is saying. You don't know how many people the Lord might have you speak to, that you save those little kids' lives. Ultimately, from going down a path that isn't beneficial for them in the long run. And there's just such great, your testimony is powerful. Don't ever think it's not, but I would say absolutely, God will, if you will let the Lord will absolutely take your testimony and use it pretty much as a weapon against the enemy. And that is powerful and needed. Secondly, last thing I was going to say on that, I will never forget sitting in, speaking to someone, a woman who had been sexually assaulted at 7 years old. And she said to me, Michelle, do you know what justice is? I said, what? She said, I have been able to help so many women who have been raped and sexually assaulted that the devil regrets the day he touched me. And she said, that's justice. And so I just say that as an encouragement of you can have that moment yourself too.
God can use anything for good. I used to hear that expression and not understand what it meant. And it's like, is that a justification for evil things happening? No, it's just that out of evil, God can still work good out of evil. One other quick, I saw your follow-up comment, AD Victorium. I'm taking steps, going to start reclaiming my identity. Got a lot of work to legally get my name back. Just something there about identity. I've mentioned this before, but social justice, the whole woke cult is so focused on identity and power. That's what's at the center of this whole belief system. It's about redistributing power based on identity. And identity is like, it's just one of the huge, like the two center pieces of this religion are identity and power. And when I started leaving that cult, it took me forever to figure out, like, what was my identity? And in retrospect, no wonder that was one of the first questions I was asking myself, like, who am I? And now I've hit upon, like, I'm a beloved child of God. That's it. That's who you are. And all the other things are things I've done or things that have happened to me or things I've thought or things that, but none of that is or things about me that describe my physical characteristics, but none of that is who I am. And yeah, anyway, you just made me think about that. So good luck to you in reclaiming your identity.
And we'll pray for you.
And we'll pray for you. It looks like those guys had to take a quick break. Little Chad, do you mind if I read a couple more of these super chats?
Oh, sure.
Randy Wallen for $10. Thank you, Randy. Again, says today's woke is yesterday's liberal. Welfare, abortion, pill, church abuse, and godless communism brought us here. Liberalism has no limiting principles, and we are seeing humanity's end as a result. What do you guys think about that? I'm still thinking about liberalism and its involvement in woke.
It's a little more Blackpool than I usually like to say. I mean, I agree that it's all bad, but I like to think of this as an opportunity for a great revival, right? There's been lots of times, especially in if you look at Christian history, where at the time you're most put upon, you can have the biggest flourish in response, right? You can have the biggest, and the problem is, I think, the vectors of attack on the church and Christianity are doing it now with knowledge of the past and knowing that happens. So they're learning, right? They're adapting their attacks, so it's on us and incumbent on us as Christians not to shrink from the responsibility to defend our faith, to be open with the faith, to understand how we share that in the 21st century. It's different, right? It's not about maybe going out in the Colosseum and being martyred, and fed to the lions. It is understanding how to spread your message and spread the gospels in a way that people understand and can relate to. This is something I think I've talked with Brahma about in our conversations, which is we have to be cognizant that the way we deliver messages is going to be filtered through all these different lenses now. So you can't just necessarily go out there and do this, because I grew up and I think we're probably all similar ages, maybe slightly different, but in the 90s, which was my predominant youth phase, the Christian right
get in trouble with Michelle and Keri.
It was attacked. I don't know. That's why I'm hedging my bet. The Christian right was attacked for being uncool, not awesome, like being the source of all the. Even though Tipper Gore was leading the charge against rock music and rap music and putting labels on CDs, who got the actual blame? Because the lens got filtered, right?
The Christian
it wasn't.
Right.
It was the Christian right that became the prototype for that, and the boogeyman, and the cultural like whipping boy. And that, I think we can see that being done in the 90s immediately opened the door for what happened in the 2000s and 2010s, because it was so culturally passé and uncool to be that way, to be openly Christian and to celebrate those values. They were being attacked under these new ways. They made culture seem in some of the pop culture in antithesis to Christianity and Christian values, that it opened the door for them to start sweeping. And first they get you with the music and all this other stuff, and then they start and then you go to college and you don't want to be uncool there, and it opened up the door for basically 2 generations to be swept away from Christian values in a way that we wouldn't have expected, because we had the internet being like supercharging their ways of getting a separation. And it all started because they made it uncool, right? Like, so we have to be cognizant, like, you don't have to shy away from professing your faith, but you have to understand that you can't, you're not going to attract people by just trying to beat them over the head and tell them they're evil, right? Jesus didn't do that either, right? He had I don't want to sound like I'm from Dogma and Kevin Smith, but he was an upper, not a downer, right? Like you've got to understand that you are you have people, you have enemies who have learned now for 2,000 years of history, of Christian history, what how effective the Christian message is, and how we need to, and in their mind, how they need to subvert it.
Yeah,
So you need,
oh,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, so you need to adapt and start bringing your message in a 21st century way.
Well, and I was going to say, adding on again, piggybacking on you again, I stream with Floral Under a Rock, and Steve made such a, for whatever reason, it really got me, but he made such a great point. He was talking about how do we talk about our faith today? How do we share our faith with other people? Because that is needed in our society. Because I can say this from a minister, something that I have definitely spoken against when I preached, is the church became too much of like a consumerism. The people come, they kind of want to be entertained to a degree. They just sit and consume, and they think that's church. And yes, church is a place where you should be edified and built up through ministry and stuff like that. But the church is to go out and be the church. The church, yes, there is a physical church building, but there's also the mystical body of Christ that we've talked about, the church. And we have to be able to go out and get out of this just consumer mindset. Like, we are to all be witnesses for the Lord. Hence why the Holy Spirit comes in Acts chapter 1. You will be my witness. And anyway, Steve said, he made such a great point. He brought up what's a good way of doing that. He said, well, what does the Bible tell wives to do who have unmarried husbands? And it talks about, because of the way they live their lives, their behavior, their love towards them, might bring them into the fold. And he, again, I want to give Steve the credit for this. He made such a great point of, sometimes your job, and I would say almost all the time, your job, eventually you have to speak up, but is to be that neighbor, to be that person, to be that coworker who's just in love with Jesus. And there's something, because when you are passionate about the Lord and you truly love the Lord, that is appealing to people. That is something, when they will begin to see something that they are at least intrigued with, if not want. And we just have to have more and more Christians that their faith is authentic enough. I mean, that's what happened in my life. I mean, I was raised in a Christian home, but at 17 years old, I live in a very churchy area, but I came into contact with a person that it was an older woman. And it was like, what about this woman? There's something about this woman that I want. And it was her totally authentic, genuine love for the Lord. That's all it was. And it was a pivotal moment in my life of meeting that person. And we need all of us to do our part. Again, back to the body of Christ. So as Keri said, whether you're the toe or the head, we all have a role that we have to be playing. Because all this comes down, the destruction of the family. It's like I said, it all comes down to the immorality that has pretty much won over society.
Yeah. So you guys addressed one part of it. I guess I'll address the other. I mean, the church isn't going anywhere. No. Even if the attacks on the church forced the church underground, the church still exists. And remember, I mean, we are called to be persecuted. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So, I mean, we may be in those times, but we're always going to win. So it doesn't matter what's really going on out there right now. I mean, we have to influence it as much as we can, and we have to speak up, but the church isn't going anywhere.
I want to know if we have about half an hour left. I don't know how long you guys can stick around, but I intend to go at least half an hour more. I want to know if I could just bring it back quickly to some of the examples of how what the people in the woke left, feminist critics, queer theorists, what they think about the family and destroying the family. Do you guys mind if I just touch on a few more of these tidbits for people quickly and get your thoughts on it? Okay. So I'm going to because a couple of these touch on Christianity as well. The simple fact is that every woman must be willing to be identified as a lesbian to be fully feminist. And that was from the National Organization for Women from their newspaper, the Now Times, in 1988. Here's another. They say that all marriage is slavery. Since marriage constitutes slavery for women, it's clear that the women's movement must concentrate on attacking this institution. Freedom for women cannot be won without the abolition of marriage. This was Sheila Cronin who said this. My point in just reading all this is I think a lot of times people who are in the left, they don't know all these quotes, they don't know where it comes from, and they think, well, it might just be one kook or something. It's not. It is purposeful. It is a doctrine. It is purposeful. This is who is guiding your leftist opinions. This is in response to a question about China's policy of compulsory abortion after the first child. Molly Yard, she responded, I consider the Chinese government's policy among the most intelligent in the world. And then we get down into some of the religious ones. Marriage has existed for the benefit of men. It has been a legally sanctioned method of control over women. We must work to destroy it. The end of the institution of marriage is a necessary condition for the liberation of women. Therefore, it's important for us to encourage women to leave their husbands and not to live individually with men. All of history must be rewritten in terms of oppression of women. So through that lens, the oppression of women, we must go back to ancient female religions like witchcraft. This is from a book called The Declaration of Feminism.
Can I just point out that witchcraft didn't work out so well for women as a religion? I mean, I think logistically, I mean, what do you mean? The predominant result of women openly practicing witchcraft was being executed. So, and that was true in pagan places as well. So not just a Christian tradition for that one. It's silly. Like, I mean, the idea that marriage, if historically, I keep saying this, if you look at the history, marriage has actually been to the benefit of women, because prior to the institution of marriage, women didn't have a lot of right. Like, marriage brought about more rights and more legal protections for women than they had in a situation prior to that. I mean, do they want a situation like where Genghis Khan ends up having,
his DNA and everybody in Asia,
and 80% of the people of Asia because he just took any woman he wanted? Like, that was a situation where there wasn't marriage and protections via marriage, right? It's like, these are some of the silliest things, and it's crazy because this only works if you use a lens of like the last 100 years, where you're trying to only look at it that way. It reminds me, I know Brahma's read The Three Body Problem with the turkeys, right? The Thanksgiving scenario, right? If you take a sliver of time and you only look for that sliver of time, something might seem one specific way, but you've got to actually understand that there's a gargantuan amount of time that you're having to judge something on. And if you only looked maybe in the last, I guess, 100, 150 years, you might be able to try to say that it was, and even then I would have a lot of counter arguments about why marriage was still valuable for women. This is ridiculous. Like, there's no historical evidence in any way that marriage has been a detriment to women.
Well, and that last quote that you read that said marriage is what, for the benefit of men.
Yeah.
If anything, what marriage does is domesticates men.
Yes. Yeah. And it's for the benefit of women to have a partner going out and hunting and bringing home the woolly mammoth while you're giving birth to a baby and sheltering it and raising it. And you can't go out and kill the woolly mammoth, and you're not as strong as the man anyway to be able to do that. Like,
I don't want to be rude,
the benefit of men for marriage is access to sex. I mean, that's technically what the evolutionary benefit that they would say is. I mean, there's no benefit to having to take care of more than yourself.
If you want to,
so what it does is domesticates the man.
If you want to see the picture of what it's like without a marriage scenario, you're going to be looking at a Tate type philosophy within men, right? You know, you're going to have Andrew Tate where, or Pearl, right? Where you're 28, you've hit the wall, you're no good anymore, which is the most asinine thing. But that's what you're encouraging. Like, this philosophy leads to that, because then you're almost telling men that if you don't have if you're not making a commitment, if you don't have faith-based choices, you're only looking at women exclusively for a certain act that is going to be done, and then you move on, right? To use the parlance, the hit it and quit it. You're gonna only look for that window. You're gonna what's your range that I'm going 21 to 28, and then I'm done. You're like, and what's the outcome of that? Women who then become in their 40s, 50s, who are unmarried, no man to assist them in living and financially, no children to assist them as they get older. I'm reminded there was a article, I think was a Candace Bushnell, the lady who developed the Sex in the City. You know, she was the basis for it.
Oh yeah.
Where she did an article about how, as she's gotten later in life and now she's unmarried and has no children, she's kind of regretting her choices because there's no one around her.
Yes.
She's just living an alone and unsatisfied life. Because as you move into that phase, you're supposed to be a grandmother, maybe even a great grandmother, depending. And you're supposed to be able to look at phases of life. Like one of the important things I always want to tell people is family, as it's really meant to be, isn't just you and your wife. It's like the extended family. Like your children should have lots of exposure to their grandparents, learn value, because your children will learn things from your grandparents that they don't learn from you. Your parents will treat your children differently than they treated you, and you'll see that. And it's going to be it's again to what I was saying about having those phases of life and having the true human experience. If you don't have family, if you don't have a marriage, if you don't have children, if you don't have grandchildren, you're missing, as you're supposed to be hitting all these phases of your life that provide you with contentment and provide you with access and, you know, a better, I guess, lens to view your relationship with God. All these things are coming from how you're moving through your life as he intends. And if you cut that out, this is where you become a morally ambiguous, terrible person. Like there's a lot of bad choices you can start making when you don't have any of those tethers, when you don't have faith, when you don't have a family, when you don't have children. You can start looking, not to get too political, but a lot of bad political choices can come from people who don't have any of those things to anchor them to good choices, right? To have them do that. They start making choices for just in their moment instead of long-term thinking for the societal. You know,
Right.
And that's why it's like everything. I think there's been two massive things that, in my opinion, have destroyed society and ultimately family, because it stops the people getting married. One being the sexual revolution, which of course begins to tell women basically go be pigs. Go do what we're saying the men are doing that we don't like. Go do that too. And then also, I don't think we can really scientifically say how damaging pornography and the internet has been, because it makes men not even care to go ask a girl out. Like they don't care. Like it makes, because they're watching something that's not real. And I mean, even then it's like, if they have a woman, it's not as satisfying because it's not as ridiculous as what they've watched. I really don't think we fully grasp the
We
level.
don't know it yet. We
think
don't know all the effects yet.
I think we do
Look at
if we're
Japan.
talking about tech in general, because it's not just the access to pornography. I mean, that may be the male side of it. The female side of it, it's the access to the dating apps. I mean, and the Me Too movement also was a part of all of this. I mean, guys aren't going to approach a girl unless they're super confident they're going to get that girl, because the girls now have so many choices just on their phone that they don't tend to like being have guys advance upon them, and unless it's somebody that they find attractive enough to be talking to them. Otherwise it's sexual harassment.
Yeah, if you're in any way socially awkward, somebody will videotape you trying to say hello to a girl, and next thing you know, you're on TikTok, and you've got a girl holding the camera up behind over her shoulder and be like, look at this creeper coming at me, while I'm just trying to have my drink at the bar. Like, I mean, look at all those gym videos that come out, right? You got women purposefully wearing some of the most, I mean, my wife works out. She goes to a gym. I see the workout clothes she wears, and I see what these girls are wearing in these TikTok videos where they talk about men looking at them creepily, right? I was
Yeah.
like, that is not something you just wear to work out. That is something you wear to draw the look so you can take the video, so you can get the interactions. If you're a dude and you've got all these I mean, I disagree with it. I think it's a bad thing, but if you've got to understand, people are rational to a certain, like, you can predict behaviors based on rational thinking. Men between, you know, at that age are rational, and they're like, it is not, it is, what is the old, it's not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze, right? My risk of bad outcome is so high, I'll just sink off into the internet world like Michelle was talking about, because you've got a risk versus reward factor. And God help us once the adult robots become available, because when you've got a generation of men who will now have access to physical outcomes as well, you know, for what they want, you're going to have, I'm going to predict probably 60% or more of males check out if behavior changes don't happen within our nation.
Well, but at some point, like, and I get that, I get what you're saying, but at some point, like, you just got to be a man. Like, do you want me to go ask you out? Because that doesn't feel like that works. So,
Men aren't
like,
taught
at
to be
some
men
point,
anymore.
like,
Michelle, you
man
don't
up.
all right, so, and I'm the generation before this group, maybe a generation and a half. Even starting in middle school, I had it drilled into me that, you know, all the different ways you have to back off and not put any pressure on a woman, or you are leading to date rape. Like, back then they were just talking about date rape, right? Like, even if you put any pressure on a woman, if you are just asking, and this is just to ask them out, and it leads to outcomes, right? You have now committed. It was my college orientation. This was day one. They had a whole presentation on, if you are asking them out and they, you know, and you pursue them and put pressure for them to go out with you, any outcome after that is date rape. I was like, wow. Let me tell you how that had me check out for a good few months into my college career. I was like, I'm not getting arrested and thrown out of college for this. But that was, and that was back the late 90s, early O's. That was the orientation. I don't even know what they're probably telling guys now.
But I think it's on men and women to overcome this programming.
Yes, it
Yes.
is.
Because women are also being programmed that, you know, take him for all he's worth and sleep around like men do, like what you say, or you say men do, and, you know,
6
rack
foot
up
tall,
a high body
250,000 bank
count.
account.
Yeah, and sex doesn't mean anything. Have it with anyone. It's all transactional. Become a whore. Like all of this stuff that women are getting programmed with as well. You know, look at his bank account, all that stuff. And so it's like men and women have to figure out how to deprogram the younger generation, like how to help younger people to see through this stuff at an earlier age. And they're being programmed with it, as you said, little Chad, at an earlier age. Like I got hit with all the feminist stuff. That's how I came into the woke cult, was through the feminist door. But I got hit with it in college. I cannot imagine if I'd gotten hit with it in elementary school.
Yeah.
Like
Well, that's the thing with what Michelle is saying. I mean, yes, we need men to be more masculine, but the men are getting hit with the feminism immediately. Men are being told that they are useless to society. It doesn't do anything good to emasculate the men. The men aren't going to act like men when they've been emasculated their whole lives. So they don't know how to. They don't know how to do it anymore.
Which is why
we
fight
see it
so
in the younger
hard.
generations. Yeah.
I was going to say, which is why they fight so hard when they pass laws that they did in Florida to try to keep it out of elementary school. We're trying to, like, just teach it, like, hey, you can't start talking to my second grader about gender identity and sexual identity and all these things. You can at least wait till middle school and high school, please, thank you. And they went, look at the backlash about trying to pull that out of elementary schools. So clearly it's, you know, like they've been, and this is one of the things, I don't want to say this the wrong way, but as a political scientist, I admire about the left. They do incrementalism better than anyone, right?
Oh,
They moved that Overton window. And
Yes.
on the right side, we have these people, and no offense, I love them, but that are like, it's my principles, it's all or nothing. And I was like, that's not ever gonna work. You've got to pull the, like, I look at it now, I'm adamantly pro-life, but it's killing, like, it's destroying political windows all over the country. You've got to understand where you are at and what you can get, and if you try to go fully one way, you're going to push people into another direction. So
Yeah,
you've
your
got to
belief
move
may be
incremental. Get the
yeah,
best you can get right now. I remember in the 90s when safe, legal, and rare was the
rare.
mantra of the Democrats, right? It only took them
Because they keep
25
moving it.
years to get to, on demand, like, what is it, scream out my abortion, or whatever they were chanting
Shout
for
my
that.
abortion.
Shout
Yeah.
my abortion. And that was just from the 90s to now. If we need to go we need to start pulling some of that stuff and understand, go incremental the other direction. Because it is within human nature that, if you, like Michelle said, if you live a godly life and you're doing that, and you're being successful, and you're being an example, and you're showing people that you don't hate the person, you hate the sin, right? I don't hate you as a person, but I'm telling you what you're doing is wrong. I'm not gonna tell you that I'm not gonna lie to you about that. And you be an example of what a good life is. You don't have to necessarily always go all or nothing to get things going. When we're talking about getting men and women back together, I think the first step is, in this deprogramming, is having to move incrementally back, right? It is the best thing to do is go right now, start going after the elementary school programs, get it out of there. That's the easy. People at this point in time are still polling, pretty supportive of that, even across left-wing segments of the population. Start incrementally moving it out and pushing pressure on the other direction. Like, that's what you got to do right now, because men and women are being programmed, like you said, Keri, and now it's moved to elementary school, especially like California's passing laws where they don't even have to tell parents if elementary school kids have decided they have a different gender identity
Yeah.
in their school. I mean, that's programming from the most impressionable phases on. We've got to start taking that battle there, because if we want men to be men and women to actually be women in their traditional gender roles, we have to take the wins where we can get them right now and keep moving forward, right? Like playing a
Yeah.
football game, get a first down, get another first down. Don't go for the touchdown every play. You got to move the ball down the field.
And I didn't mean to take it to like gender against gender, Michelle. I completely agree on the pornography thing. I mean, it's ruining young men completely. It's ruining all generations of men.
And
Oh,
women.
The
absolutely.
prevalence,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to get it now than when you used to have to go to the special bookstore, or even just
find it out in the
have
woods.
to find it out in the woods or under your dad's bed or whatever. I mean, it's so much easier, and people are exposed to it at 8 or 9 years old and younger at this point.
Yes.
And they see that as the norm, not what is reality.
They see that as the norm. They think
And it does it to the girls too, because
Yeah,
they
the
try
girls.
to act like it's the norm.
Yes. I just wanted to hit a couple of these chats. This is Rock Lexicon says this is a modern version of what happened in the Garden of Eden. Eve rebelled for her own empowerment. Adam stood by passively and caused his and her destruction. Yes.
I wouldn't say he stood by passively, though, because he partook.
He engaged. Yes.
He engaged.
Mhm.
Super Base for $2 says it's turning the frogs gay. Thank you.
It's turning the freaking frogs gay.
Yeah, the frogs are turning gay, that's for sure. Southern Belle for $5 says even during the change, fake estrogen is pushed. Oh, menopause. It cannot duplicate all the chemical functions and the benefits for your organs with real estrogen. Thank you, Southern Belle. Randy Wallen also, again, for $5. Thanks, Randy, says abortion made fatherhood and family commitments easily escapable by men. This killed the family.
If men had a say in it, generally, I'd agree with that. But one of the most damning things for a relationship between a man and a woman, right? I don't care if the man says, I respect your choice, it's your body or whatever. if you know, and if it's just say your girlfriend at the time, if she goes and gets an abortion, there's a fundamental part of you that's never ever going to be at peace with that. Like either you're a terrible, because I'll tell you, there's a 10% chance you might be a terrible demonic person who might be okay with that. But if you're any kind of loving man who should be a father, you're never going to forget. It's always going to be in the back of your head, always. And that is not the way. I would love to see the statistics on how successful long-term relationships are between men and women when a woman has an abortion and the man knows about it. Because as much as they say, yeah, your body, your choice, you do what you want to do, I'll support you, I guarantee you within a couple of years they're probably gone. And they might not even be able to put their finger on what's wrong with it, but you are made in the image of God. You have certain inherent values that are built into you where things are going to be abhorrent even if your society tells you they can't be. And that's what, and it's true for women too. It is not natural to kill your child. The psychological ramifications of women getting abortions is never talked about. Never. And the damage it does long term to women who get them, they will never let you put a study out on that. They'll never study it because they don't want that ever documented. Because I can tell you, I know maybe Michelle, you've seen it in church, environments. There are dozens and dozens of stories where women later, come back to God, and it is one of the regrets they can never get over. It's like something that just still, even though they've been forgiven, even though they've accepted responsibilities, the just psychological toll of having killed your most innocent child, right? It's and it rightly so, it should bother you, right? It should always be something that bothers you that you did, even though you can be forgiven for it. I do think it's okay to regret that choice even once you've been forgiven, but a person's never, even if they say they're okay with it, I think there's so much damage internally that doesn't get talked about from doing that act, that's on men and women, is another thing that's just I remember I student taught when I was in college, and I was in a high school, and I was a political science major, so I was teaching a civics class, and we were going over Supreme Court cases, and Roe v. Wade was one of them we were talking about. And unasked, one of the girls raised her hand, and she's like, "Oh, I've had 8 abortions." And you want to talk about a record scratch going on. It was just like, I was like, I don't even know what, we're moving on. I'm not talking about this right now. But I could see, like, it's been a long time. You could see when I looked at that person, there was a toll. Like, I don't know what was going on in their life that led them to a lot of those choices and what was doing, but it is evident. You could see, like, when people had what you call dead eyes,
like a doll's eyes.
Yeah, she had that, and I was like, that's. I mean, I don't want to, like, but it reminded me of Harry Potter later when you found out about, well, he's like the Horcruxes, right? You broke your soul when you were murdering something. Like, it actually is a destructive act, and it just taints you. Ugh, I mean, but it's damage to the
if
family.
you ever get to hear Adam Krigler talk about that situation, he had that situation, and he has talked about it on a couple streams. But Krigler had a girlfriend who did have an abortion, and it completely changed his way of thinking on a lot of things.
But that's a good example of societal pressure on a man and woman in a relationship, right? Right now it's legal, from in most places, and it's encouraged for a woman to be the only decision maker, right? The society tells you as the man, your role is to shut up and say, your body, your choice, right? I mean, I don't agree with that. That's not a faith-based argument, but that's what the majority of media will tell you is your role as the man. That's what being a good man is. But
Were you going to say something, Keri?
Oh, I was going to say, yeah, I've talked about it also. And I'm not really going to go down that path again tonight, but it does take a toll.
Well, and I think, so continue, Keri.
No, just, I often find in these videos, I'm the one going, lived it. So learn from my terrible mistakes. I don't want to, anyway, I felt remiss not saying something. Maybe because I haven't talked about that with little Chad, but
I apologize if it was brought up bad memories.
No, thank you, but that's not necessary. I appreciate you talking about it. Go ahead, Michelle.
My brain has forgotten it. It will come back in a few.
But it's
can I
weird
just-
just how much pressure there is just being a man and woman trying to be in a relationship from
Oh!
every direction.
Okay, little Chad just brought it back to what I was going to say.
Okay.
That what we're talking about and men not having any right with as far as that. That is why as a Christian home, I get it. I get like there is more women have to be even a level more responsible because you are the one who will, bring that child into this earth. But people have got to start teaching their sons how important it is for them to not just be sleeping around with random women. Because, okay, so you might have a case where that happens and you don't have any say in it and it eats you alive as a decent person, as a decent man. Or she does have the kid and you slept with someone who's crazy and a horrible person. And now your baby is at minimum with that person 50% of the time.
I know.
Yeah.
Like,
So
that's,
I just feel like it is so important for parents to
Yeah.
really stress this to both boys and girls. Like what can happen, when we don't make the wisest decisions.
What I told my daughters is, I prefer you absolutely did not sleep with anybody before marriage. But if
Mhm.
you're going to, you better be real sure that it is somebody that you can imagine having a child with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Because even though they would go against me on, waiting until marriage, I seriously doubt either of them would go against me on the abortion ideas, just because of their raising, and because of their beliefs. So, that has to be the idea that is installed in all the kids is
Mhm.
don't sleep with somebody you're not willing to have a kid with. The one night stand thing should never be a thing.
No.
But
just
they
quickly,
want
does everybody else have audio in the chat? None of your business is asking. Just let us know.
Other people are making comments about what we're currently saying. So
Okay.
I just checked my YouTube feed and there was audio.
Southern Belle just quickly for $5 said Hollywood beauty standards made unrealistic expectations. That was probably early on. I'm not sure when that one came in, but it certainly did. And it might have been when we were talking about porn. Thank you for that.
I think so.
I'm sorry I cut you off, little Chad.
No, I ramble, so that's good. Good that you do that.
Super Base for $5 says we've been on the front lines in California to fight the woke, and even in this den of Satanists, I feel like the tide is turning. God bless. Super Based. God bless you. I like the way you describe it as a den of Satanists, having lived there. I would agree. I lived in Los Angeles though, which is really like the cauldron of the den of Satanists. LA.
Brahma, what was the line from Star Wars? Right, you won't find a bigger
more-
hive of scum and villainy.
Most Eisley.
That's Los Angeles right there.
That
Yep.
was LA. Yeah. Spawn 1701 for $9.99. Thank you so much. Says hi, Keri, Brahma, and everyone. It was so nice to meet you two in Dallas and share some of my story and how I continue to keep my faith in God and share my testimony to others. Ephesians 4:2. Thank you so much
good to meet you, too.
Yeah, it was good.
Sounds
to meet
like you guys were a big old hit at that meetup. Good job, Keri and Brahma.
Yeah,
I love the meetups.
and we let Mad tag along.
Mad. You got him to a meetup and you got headphones. Good.
Yeah.
Force of Light, who's that? Gifted a membership. Why'd you do that?
I just thought I would.
Force of Light, thank you.
You're welcome. Whoever got it.
Keely Chow, who's been a member for 4 months, thanks so much, says it takes 2 people to make the marriage work. Yes, honey. Absolutely does.
Which is really where the problem with no fault marriage is, because it's so easy for one person to decide they want out instead of both people having to work at their marriage, because marriage is not easy through the whole thing. I mean, there's lots of ups and downs. You have to be constantly putting in the work on marriage.
And then Randy Wallen for 5 says women in the workplace sounded like a great idea until children ended up being raised in daycare and by the school system brainwashing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's a whole nother
We should do a
Oh,
whole
man.
episode on homeschool
Yeah.
because I have a lot of that stuff about
Oh
to say that
man.
there hasn't been any true innovation that has come out of public schools at all.
Let's do a whole one on homeschool. I mean, I've covered that on my live shows before, but I'd like to do it on the Christian panel from a Christian perspective. Can we just kind of one other quick clip I wanted to show? I was going to show you Busy Phillips yelling about her abortion, but instead, I'm sure you guys have seen that. So
My career exists because I had an abortion.
yeah, I have my car because I had an abortion.
Is that the Phillips that was married to the guy who got arrested from that 70s show? Or a
Danny
different one?
Masterson.
Okay.
Were they
think so.
married?
I believe so.
Oh.
Well, there's
But-
like 3 Phillipses. So
I'm
that's
not
hard
sure
to
if she's
figure.
that one, but I do know that since she yelled and talked about her husband staying home and taking care of her kids, they've gotten a divorce. And I just thought of her
Mhm.
because you were saying about, abortions and in marriages. But let me show you this one instead. Okay, this is Melissa Harris Perry from MSNBC.
Hold on. You're gonna have to pause on that. Busy Phillips got an abortion when she was married?
Oh, I don't know when the
Oh,
abortion
okay.
happened. I know that she said in that yelling speech I was going to play, she said, I have all these things because of my abortion, including my loving husband who takes care of my kids so I can go to my work.
Okay.
I can clear it up. She had an abortion earlier, which
Okay.
let her have a career in her mind.
Yeah.
Which then she met her husband, had kids with him, and now they have gotten divorced since then.
Well,
And
that's
the kids
like
are like a couple years old.
that's just like Michelle Williams when wasn't it Michelle Williams who got up at the Oscars and
Yes.
praised her abortion that allowed her to be there?
Yes.
There's been
They're
a few who
basically
have.
blessing their abortions.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen this Melissa Harris Perry clip? It's a couple years old.
I don't
No.
think so.
Okay, this is just her talking about families and children and who children belong to.
No volume.
Yeah.
No audio.
We've got no audio.
No audio?
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay. Hold on.
She's still on MSNBC. I think she got let go a few years back, right?
I'm not sure.
I'm not
I
sure.
don't watch
I
MSNBC
don't
if
watch
I can help it.
MSNBC normally.
Okay, tell me if you can hear it now. Oh man. Can you
Nope.
hear that?
Nope.
No? Ah, okay.
You don't have the tab muted, do you? Like up at the top at the tab, you don't have it muted
No.
up there, right?
No, but I wonder if one of you guys could share this instead if I give you the link.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, do that.
Okay, let me drop this in the private chat. This is a really fast clip.
You got it, Michelle?
Yes. Let me see.
Okay.
Let me see if I can pull this up.
Thank you for
Okay.
that.
1 second.
This is another one that's just very succinct about who they think is, who your children belong to.
The 20 teens version of It Takes a Village, probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's also one of the quotes that I didn't get to in that list, but it was about kids and who gets to raise them. A quote from Dr. Mary Jo Bain, a feminist, who said, in order to raise children with equality, we must take them away from families and communally raise them.
Yep.
And so this pairs nicely with that.
Well, if
The
this was
only
a few years
equality
ago,
is
there's
equal
probably
suffering.
BLM. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole BLM movement, one of their main fundamental, things was get rid of the nuclear family.
Destruction of the nuclear family.
Okay, let me know if you guys can hear.
Never invested
Yes.
as much in public education as we should have because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
That's it. I just
Never invested as much in public.
And here's my thing. Here's my thing. One, no, they don't belong to the community. But it's if we're truly living up in say our Christian community, there should be people that definitely add into your child's life, but the parent has to be the main person here.
Yeah. I mean, again, Genesis, we were created in the likeness of God's image. Our children are created in the likeness of our spouses, the mix of the male and the female they're created in their image. So they are a part of those two people. Just like marriage makes basically two souls one. I mean, having a child is like a 3-in-1.
I like the way that they kind of hide it, and it sounds like, it's almost like they bury it in there's one drop of truth in there,
Yes.
and then they try to make it all sound like, "Oh, well, this sounds good." They're just talking about getting more support from the community and, how families plug into the community and, help your neighbor out where their kid if they need a ride to school or something. It just sounds like something, "Oh, we didn't mean it in any nefarious way. We just meant community's good and helping to raise the kids." But no, she's literally saying the children belong to us.
All your children are belong to us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a hive mind, right? It's
Yeah.
because the only equal result you can ever truly give is equal suffering. Like it's it's what happened in communism, right? There's always going to be that upper echelon. So, but for the if you want equality amongst your people, it's the equality of always living in fear, living in suffering, and living in squalor. Because if you have any kind of system that has any meritocracy to it, people will rise up unequally. Not everybody. God didn't create everybody out of like a cloning lab where you're all exactly the same with the exact. You have gifts from God, you have talents from God, you have purpose from God, and it's not the same for every person. You're going to always have different outcomes.
It goes back to the equity versus equality argument that we've all heard and made.
And we talk about that, and we've spent more money on education in the last 40 years than we ever have before. And we've gotten, if you look at the test scores, my son who's homeschooled, he's coming out of 3rd grade going into 4th, and he's testing. We do the standardized test even though we don't have to, and he's testing 11th and 12th grade level. And I talked to my wife after he did that test, and I was like, is that saying you're really good at homeschool teaching, or that an indictment of public schools that 11th and 12th graders are reading and writing at a level of a 3rd grader? Like,
well, I think the indictment is, we look at what happened during COVID, and that was society trying to raise our children, and we lost 20 IQ points off of most of those kids that were in school during that time period.
Yeah.
I think that was the average. Was the IQ has gone down by an average of 20 points amongst that generation.
It's also they pushed back, the CDC pushed back the basic milestones, the very early milestones at which age children learn how to speak and to form words, and they just quietly changed that on their websites. Like, hey, now it's actually on average kids are learning to speak like 6 months later or a year later than these, but they didn't relate any of it to the years that we forced everyone to wear masks so that kids couldn't learn lip reading,
Right.
like how to
sound
form
words,
words, how to sound, mouth movements, or even just facial expressions.
Yeah, and it's that's one of that what effective, like, public education really hit its stride in the around the turn of the century, and that's no surprise. That's also when some of the ideological attacks on faith really started getting in earnest, right? Communism and thing. They're one of the core things they had to destroy, as we've talked about this episode, is faith, right? Take out that pillar, because faith is a strong defense against a lot of those things. The public school institutions then not started evolving in order to really go after faith as a pillar, not just to provide school services, but Keri, I don't know if you ever looked into like how many services are provided out of public schools. It's like we're now like there's pushes all over the country to give them all meals to come out of public schools, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, like to make sure that kids are being fed exclusive. And it's under the argument like no child should go hungry. And
I know
sounds great.
And I know they're putting mental health care for kids under public school funding. Like, hey, that sounds like a great idea. Not like we're going to let the government not just indoctrinate your kids, but they're going to be your kids' there's psychologists and get into their head.
That comes out with what's called an IEP, which is an individual education plan. if your child is identified as having special needs, that triggers the IEP, the individual education plan, and the school has to then be the responsible party to deliver. And again, it's under the guise of we have to do this to be able to educate them. But then it's like, well, part of that is they have to get mental health treatment, or they have to, if there's special needs, that we now provide the the doctors and nurses who will provide speech therapy and all these other things. And all of it is making the school a nexus. And that's why you have so many administrators, and the growth of the administrative state within schools also coincides to all of the woke ideology being implemented, because you've got people who are coming out of college to be administrators who are programmed to think that way and start moving that stuff right into it. So the schools, to me, just getting back to the subject of the thing, from an indoctrination of the youth standpoint, is actually the primary delivery vector
Yes.
to attack the family. And
they're
that's
giving
where
them
it's
more
going.
ways with the school, because like healthcare, we have to keep our kids on healthcare until they're 26. But at the age of 16, you as a parent are no longer allowed to do anything for them on their health care that you're paying for.
And they're trying to move
My
it
daughters
earlier.
have to fill their own prescriptions or request their own prescriptions filled at 16. I'm not allowed to know what they're on.
Is it California
allowed
tried to
any
move it to
information.
12? I think California wanted
12
to be
or
able
13.
to move it to like 12 or 13, so it could be administered through basically through a school nurse who could be
Exactly.
the exclusive decision maker with the child and completely cut the parents out. They would be able to be a prescription delivery service for hormones or whatever else to children as young as 12. That was, I think,
Yep.
the current legislative year in California. They were proposing that. And the reason they do that is because, and it's when schools every year, right? How do they attack conservative politicians? They're going to take money from the schools. They don't want any money from the schools. They don't want to pay teachers. That money isn't going to pay teachers. That money goes to fund all these other things,
Programs.
these programs. And that's what no one ever talks about. Like, I looked at it, why does a high school, like when I was in high school, we had one principal and two vice principals and our school had over 1,000 people. That same school now has 3 vice principals for each grade and a principal and a vice principal.
Yeah. And we had a counselor, but that counselor was to help counsel us, like, what college you going to, or are you going to a trade school, or what do you want to do? It wasn't like therapy counseling.
Yeah. Like, hey, do you know if you might be trapped in the wrong body?
Exactly.
And
What are you talking to my kid about? I just wanted to show you guys these literacy rates since you were talking about this little Chad. Tiffany Justice, who is one of the founders of Moms for Liberty, they do a great job of talking about this stuff. And she's always highlighting how much money we've spent on public education. And, the 4th grade literacy rates right now, not proficient. White students, 58% not proficient. Hispanic students, 79% not proficient. Black students, 83% not proficient. And it keeps falling. And it's not just literacy, it's math, it's across the board.
so the only way to explain those results is to say those results are by design, that you want those rates to fall. You want a more pliable group.
Idiocracy.
You want to have a large segment that is not smart enough to understand. Like, you're moving towards the absolute, like a 10% elite and 90% serf.
Cattle.
Well, look at like Sonny Hostin on The View, sitting there throwing a fit about public schools and defunding public schools yesterday, and talking about how Republicans are going to do this and do that. She went to a private school. Her 2 kids are in private school. I mean, they're perfectly willing for their kids to go to a private school, but everybody else needs to be dumbed down. That's how you create a multi-class system.
I think the last president who sent his kid to a public school was Jimmy Carter. I think when he was president, he sent his daughters to public schools in DC, and the presidents before him didn't, and the presidents after him didn't. Like, Chelsea went to Sidwell Friends, which was, I think, I think that's where the Obamas sent their daughters to, and that's one of the most exclusive private schools. I think the tuition's like 30 to 40 grand a year for elementary, middle, and high school. So
Yeah.
you're talking like private college level money just to go through that, and that's where they sent them. And so it's amazing. Like, if you want to know, rules for thee, not for me, right?
Oh yeah.
They're not sending
Oh.
their kids at all to these schools. They don't want them near it. But
And that
that's what they're
touches
going
on-
to defend.
That touches on one last thing I wanted to talk about on the family values and the nuclear family. The other thing that it does, getting rid of the nuclear family and family values, is you do not generate generational wealth anymore.
No.
So like those people,
Mhm.
they can send their kids to a $30,000 to $40,000 school because of generational wealth for the most part. If you don't have a family unit, you're not having that generational wealth be created. It keeps everybody else in the lower classes as far as how much money they've got, what they can accomplish. I mean, anybody can rise out, but your chances are so much less if you're not part of a family
The
unit.
biggest cheat code for success of children is a 2-parent family.
Yep.
Yes.
Well, specifically a 2-parent male
and
female.
Yeah. That that is like the stat they never want to acknowledge because it's sacrilege to ever just point out. And it is one of the, in social sciences, it is like the greatest differential of any like there's no arguing with it. No matter what situation is, a 2-parent family, male, female, mother, father, together, married, is such a huge, I mean, if you want to talk about inequality, right, that it doesn't matter, and it's across races. It doesn't matter what it's black, white, Hispanic, Asian. It controls for groups. Every ethnic group does so many standard deviations staggeringly higher in a 2-parent household that you'd think a rational country would be encouraging that all the way around. Like the best indicator of success for your country's children is being in a nuclear husband, wife, father, mother family unit.
Biblical family. I mean, the biblical nuclear family is a foundational societal unit. Everything is built upon that. That's why all the alphabet stuff, all of that, none of that progresses society in any way. Even though they call themselves progressives, you cannot progress a society by getting rid of the actual unit that creates society.
But that's
The
why they
building
want
block.
your kids. Like that's why it's
that's why they need your kids now, because they're not producing kids. They have to indoctrinate everybody else's.
And they always like to trot out like the Handmaid Tale like memes and things. It's like there's nothing more Handmaid Tale than a same-sex couple putting in like a little order form for a surrogate baby.
Yeah.
Like and they do these and I see them online and they do the pictures and they're posing and great, it's legal. That's fine. But it is not.
As much as I like Dave Rubin, I can't stand that aspect of him.
A lot of times they pose in the hospital bed, like you just mentioned. It's not just that they're at the hospital and
Pete
the
Buttigieg
surrogate gives them the baby, but one of them will get in a hospital gown and
And
get in
act
bed.
like they're laying in the bed like they just gave birth.
Exactly.
Pete Buttigieg and his husband did that.
And it's funny because you know what you don't see in that picture? Any acknowledgement of the woman who had to carry the child for the 9 months, who had to go through labor, possibly C-section, regular labor. And that is Handmaid's Tale. They are a birthing unit. They are, if you ever read Dune, they're an axolotl tank.
Yeah.
They are there to breed something for somebody to take home. And I think it's also one of the reasons they're trying to get girls to make all these choices and devalue themselves, because then they'll also go out and they'll look up online and they'll see an offer for 20 grand to be a surrogate. And, you get to have all your living expenses paid for the 9-10 months you're in process. And that looks like a good deal if you have really bad choices in front of you. And it's not a good deal. You are giving away your child for money. That is, that's trafficking.
Now, I've not looked into this, but I saw one study that said that was kind of showing how there's some actual complications for women can be after they've done surrogacy, because the body just knows innately like this is not
That wasn't natural.
Yeah, this didn't belong here. Like, again, I've not looked into it deeply. I saw one study that was saying it's not as good for the women to do surrogacy.
Well, that wouldn't be surprising. I don't know if you've ever read it's a famous study about like war orphans in World War II and how they were dying at such a high rate. They were in care, right? They were being fed, they were being done, but it was an orphanage setting where the people weren't really interested, and it was because they weren't having human contact.
Yes, yeah.
Like, and once they someone came in and started making them hold the children in addition to just feeding them and putting them back in their cribs, and the death rate dropped like back to normal. And it was one of the first times they had scientific evidence that having human contact, having a female, like in this case, a female to bond with as a child, was a key developmental item. It wasn't just that you needed milk. It wasn't just that you needed clothes and a bed. You genuinely need, as a human,
for survival,
to have contact with some kind of figure that you can acknowledge as a parent. In this case, hopefully a mom and a dad. So it wouldn't surprise me if there's not an innate thing that comes from there's a lot of stuff about how psychological problems can manifest physically. The idea that, again, subconsciously, if you're a woman, you have been made by God with purpose to be a mother generally. And if you are using that gift from God to just sell a child,
yeah,
you are fundamentally going against your role, your purpose, and there's got to be some kind of issue that develops as a result of it.
Yeah.
Again, they won't ever fund that study, though. I doubt it. So.
These are some of the pictures. I mean, there's a lot of them. This is one of my friends on Twitter, Gay Lumberjack. He said, this recent trend of gay men taking pictures with their surrogate's newborn baby in a hospital bed needs to end. Read the room and get out of the damn bed. And there's like this whole spate of pictures of
acting
gay men.
Like they're exhausted from sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah. This is Buttigieg. At least they weren't in a hospital gown in that one. There was another one I was thinking of that was just, I mean, there's a ton of these now. It's the trend. It's almost like how people pose their
pets,
their proposal, like where they have a secret cameraman there to film the proposal. But you're like, but you had to arrange this. So it was like, it was all arranged as she knew. So this is not a surprise, but it's sort of similar to me. It's like this weird staged, like, let me get in the hospital gown.
Oh, it's
why?
Instagram.
Yeah.
It's Instagram filters on everything in life.
And if you're starting your relationship with your child in such a performative social media act, how clearly does that set what that child's value is to you? This is a purse puppy. This is a pup. This is a Chihuahua in a purse. Era with Paris Hilton era.
Oh, I personally can't stand, not that there's anything wrong with it for anyone who's done it. They personally make me gag, the gender reveals on Instagram and social media. It's just gaggy to me, quite frankly.
Spending time, effort, and money on it seems superfluous. Yeah.
It just feels like it's just for that Instagram pic, though.
And that's one of the problem. That's another, even people who are ostensibly engaged in traditional family units are being programmed to be performative, right?
Yes.
To perform for an audience. Your role as a father or as a mother is to take care of your child and be a good parent. It is not to go on social media and get likes and clicks. I made a comic strip that is mostly based on my interactions with my son. There is not one picture you will ever find on any of my social media of my son. Not one. I talk about him in general terms. I talk about my wife in general terms, but I don't put any pictures because I hide behind an avatar for specific reasons. But part of it is because that's not what any of this my marriage is my marriage. It's my wife's marriage. That's just for us to work through whatever going on. It's not to be performative for social media. I hate, because I see it started, again, I was there from the beginning with Facebook and all these things, and you could see people and I have experience with family members where you're like, I know you are not you're a single mom making bad choices, and you're putting pictures out there like you're Donna Reed. And it's like, that's not what your life is, but you're doing it you're presenting that veneer. It's like the Instagram people who go onto a private plane that's on the tarmac to take pictures and pretend they're flying in private planes, and then they walk out. They're just they're creating an illusion. Your family life is being turned into an illusion, and you're not putting the real work into being part of the family. And you're teaching your children from day one now that everything is a performative illusion for the people to see. Maybe I'm dating myself with Mommy Dearest. The
No, you're not.
yeah, that's what comes to mind, right? She was putting out that picture of the perfect life and the perfect child she had, and in the real, in what was in the reality, she's beating her with a wire hanger, right? Like, I don't trust what we're gonna find out about this performative social media generation when the truth starts coming out, because they're definitely going away from what it really means to be, I think, a good parent.
I know we have to wrap it up soon. I know several people have to go. I just wanted to show you one of the grossest ones I was trying to find, which was Shane Dawson. Okay, that's it. He's a YouTuber. There he is. He's also talked about having sexually abusing animals, but now he was able to buy 2 babies. So there you go. In the hospital gown. Didn't mean to end it on something super dark. Just adding to those pictures of the creepy stuff. Where should we? What's a final note that's like not negative that we could wrap it up on, and then everybody, like little Chad, it's your first time here being on camera, so I'd love for you to tell people where they can find you, but also something positive.
A final note I would say is, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's like Brahma Bull said, the church is going to be here, but we in the church, all we can do is our part. And that starts with us. And whether that's teaching your kids or, you doing it yourself. I mean, yeah, you have to do it yourself or they're not going to listen. But we have to start being the change we want to see. And really teaching children, passing that on, instilling that into kids so they can grow up and be that change as well.
And on the positive side, that I would say, as much as I've talked about and we've gone over all these things, we are in an era where you have more ability to teach your children yourself, to control. Like, I run a Plex server, so my son's watching cartoons from the 80s and 90s. He's not watching any of the crap. We don't even have current year TV. I mean, you have the ability now, if you use the tools at your disposal, to create an environment that is probably the most ideal learning environment for children that we've ever been able to do. The resources for homeschooling are so available. They're low cost too. You can get curriculums for elementary school for less than $100. And if you go to church sales where people are selling their ones from previous years, you can get them even cheaper. So the capabilities that we have as parents in a family raising children are actually more today than they've ever been. You just need to take the time to do it. Don't feel like down. Don't let anyone convince you that it's not something you can manage. The cost of daycare is so much that if you start looking at the homeschool options, if you want to have a spouse stay home, you can end up usually not having that much of an income loss just because it costs so much to put kids in daycare while you're working. So I would say that on the positive side, there's so many more resources. Homeschool groups are available. You don't have to worry about socialization issues, which is usually the attack method. They'll go out like, your homeschool kid's going to grow up weird because he's never around kids. My kid has more of a social life than I do, and he's homeschooled. He's out every day with different groups. We have church-based ones. We have secular-based ones. We're giving him exposure to all the different groups so he knows how to interact with people. It's a great time to do those kinds of choices. So I'm pretty hyped on that, and I think a lot of people should kind of feel happy that if they're having kids, you have the more opportunity now than you ever did to kind of control the education and help them be, grow up into functional, good adults who aren't afraid of their faith and all those other good things that go with that.
I love that. Thank you, little Chad. There's a couple resources I've plugged here before, just in Texas. Rebel Educator, Hannah Frankman. She helps parents if they're scared. I'm talking about the parents who are scared and think they can't do it. She helps you plan a path for homeschooling. And my friend Deb Philman, The Reason We Learn, has lots of resources. But like you said, there's tons of resources out there now, I think, from what I've seen, for doing it on your own or with a homeschooling community.
Yeah.
Little Chad, where can people find you online?
I'm on Twitter at Lil Chad 10 because Lil Chad 1 through 9 was already taken. I'm also on YouTube. I co-host a podcast called Ascendant Art. Brahma's usually there hanging out on Fridays. We're gonna be doing a watch along on the debate probably tomorrow. Starting a political show that'll be a lot of fun. Keri might show up, maybe.
Yeah, I think I will.
So,
That sounds more fun than trying to get one together myself.
Trying to do it yourself. We may have Brandon Morris too. He hasn't committed yet, but he'd be a good one during the debate too. Editor of Red State.
nice. Yeah, so the Ascendant Art side is more of a kind of like a pop culture hangout one. So the hopefully people enjoy that too. It's end of the week. It's Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern. We do that show.
And we do music trivia at the
Music
end of the
trivia.
show.
Yeah, and it's going to be 90s again, so Brahma's going to hopefully get a win.
Hopefully.
I don't want to give you a big head and say
I've
that
lost,
you won.
1 week, and I think it was a tie.
The one you lost was last week, and it was because I made the trivia on
I
purpose
still have
for
to
you
go back
lose.
and look and see if I got. I think I tied him, but whatever.
Art, is that the link?
Yep, that's
Yep,
right.
that's the
There
one.
you go.
And thanks for having me, Keri. This has been awesome. Obviously this kind of topic doesn't usually come up on our other shows, so it's fun to talk about.
Thank you for being here, and I appreciate everyone. And there's so many different directions we can go in, so I'd love to have you back anytime. Brahma, what do you have going on?
Yeah, tomorrow night we'll be doing the debate. I don't have yelling at parked cars tonight, obviously, since we're 30 minutes past the bit. And yeah, I'm not going to be on Thursday Night Throwdown. We're going to do the debate watch along instead. I don't know if it's on my channel, Chad's channel, or both. I'm not sure how we're doing it yet. We haven't really talked about it, so we'll figure that out. But if you're subbed to both me and Ascendant Art, you'll find us tomorrow. And then Friday Ascendant Art. Saturday is the last it'll be next Saturday. Will be the last bourbon and boarding of the year because the Stanley Cup has been awarded, and Brian's out of town this weekend, but we'll be back next weekend, so we'll wrap up the season.
Cool. Okay, we're going out with a funny meme that Michelle sent us. But first, just one more weird, creepy thing. I'm sorry. This is
Oh, no.
No, you mentioned earlier, little Chad. I never got to show it. You were talking about the future and how they're pushing towards like men dating robots and the sex dolls and all this stuff. This is a boyfriend bear, and you can. I think this is the female version, and you can buy these for like $180. And it's something so creepy about it. It's like
It's disgusting.
Man,
Well,
Build-A-Bear went a different direction than I expected.
that's
Yes,
what you get
look.
when the women last month were claiming that they would rather be with a bear in the
It was
woods
that
than a
bear.
man.
Oh, I can just see this. They're gonna have a whole line where you can get different outfits for your bear boyfriend.
no, it's so wrong. It just really, I can't stand it. Okay, here's the meme from Michelle. If you guys haven't seen,
I've seen that. Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you're just listening and you're not watching, it's this meme of Moses with the 10 Commandments, and he's at a school administrator's office, and I think it's a black lesbian. I think in
I
charge.
think so.
Pretty sure.
And she says government cannot impose morality, but she's surrounded by woke morality signs like trans rights or human rights.
There's only
Roe v.
one
Wade.
problem with this cartoon. That's the
What?
American flag in the corner. They definitely wouldn't have that in the office.
Right.
That's true.
That's absolutely true. It would be the new progress.
There would
progress
probably
line.
be a little sign up about how the American flag can't be displayed because it's a hate symbol.
We're getting to that place.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys for hanging out tonight. Thank you for the chat, for being so patient with us at the beginning. If you like the show, please consider hitting like, leaving a comment. If you disagree or you want to criticize or have any questions, feel free to leave those in the chat as well or in the comments. And we'll see you 2 weeks from now. We do the show every 2 weeks on Wednesday nights at 6 Central. So
Please do
appreciate
leave
it, guys.
comments on this one because I read every comment. I usually go back 2 weeks later and still check if there's new comments on this show specifically. So do that because I like to read them and see how we're doing and also respond to a few.
Thank you guys. Take care.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.